Well, good morning, explorers, and welcome back to the Exploring Your Universe radio show. Exploring Your Universe is UCLA's biggest science fair. Every year, we have over 10,000 visitors and something like 600 volunteers, all here to showcase the wonderful science done by UCLA's graduates, undergraduates, and community members to the community. You're on air with DJ Stellar Cloud and
DJ Stats Sleuth.
DJ Stats Sleuth, aka Jaahnavee, is first and best my friend of like 3 years now. But she is a fourth-year PhD student in the Earth, Planetary, and Space Sciences department, where she does a lot of planetary science, and she has been a booth leader of EYU for at least 3 years. But before that, I think I saw her email on some board member things, so I'm excited to hear more about that. Okay, so why don't we start off with, like, were you a board member at some point?
I think I was in charge of communications.
Okay.
I remember talking to Abijah because I knew her when I was an undergrad here.
Yeah, shout out to the Abijah episode from a few weeks ago. It was really good.
And I was just telling Megan, I didn't know that she sort of semi-created the president position or recreated it. And so I remember like seeing her organizing all of this stuff for EYU, and EYU has always intrigued me. So I talked to her about becoming a board member, and I then started as a board member, then decided that I think it would be better off for me to focus on the instrument that we host a booth for, because it would allow me to understand our instrument better. And I think Emerson said, like, nothing is better than teaching it to young kids who have amazing questions. It helps you learn so much about what you do.
That's very true. From Emerson, another previous episode, who has never been a booth leader before or a board member. So I find it kind of ironic that they were the ones with like the insight of like, here's how you can deepen your understanding of science while still contributing to exploring your universe. But I just want to take a step back and have you like briefly explain the communications role, just because it might be available right now. And so people might want to be taking that role.
Yeah, I mean, I got to basically communicate with, so I was in charge of the email, essentially. And so any incoming communications, I was responsible to either direct it to the right person or to respond to it if I felt like I could. And the nice thing about that is I'm also in communication somewhat with the schools and the volunteers, but also with like just participants who are interested in coming and don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So they will write in asking questions, and I'll, be able to tell them all about EYU, which is really cool.
And you did that as a first-year grad student.
Yeah.
So you had never been to an EYU before, but you were answering questions.
Yeah, I had never been to
but
an
it was
EYU.
on Zoom.
This one was on Zoom, the first one.
Yeah, the one before yours was not on Zoom, which I learned from Abijah. But anyway, so the communications role is a really good position if you're interested in, like, I don't want to posit it like this, but kind of like networking. Like, you do talk to a lot of very important people, which sometimes can be nerve-wracking, but like, we're all here to support you, and you learn a lot about how to speak to adults. What was your favorite thing about being the communications director?
Honestly, exactly what you said, which is getting to talk to people or email people that I would never have thought about emailing, like Smadar, who's in the physics department.
Smadar knows.
I had only heard of her.
Yeah, 'cause she's kind of famous.
And she is kind of famous.
Yeah.
And I got to email back and forth with her because she was giving a talk that year on Zoom.
Yeah.
And so that was super cool to me.
She's one of our returning speakers. Big fan.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, it was just, for me, it was very worth it. And it was a good, I think, segue into what I do now, which is booth leading, honestly.
Yeah. Okay. So that all sounds great. Let's now get into that booth leading. Jaahnavee has been the booth leader of Diviner, the Moon and Infrared, for 3 years now. That was a lot of words. Let's start with Diviner. Who is she?
So Diviner is actually based on, I think it's like a goddess or something. I don't know too much about the mythology behind it. But
do you know like whose mythology it is? Like which?
I want to say Greek, but I actually don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like I would know from Percy Jackson, but,
then maybe it's not Greek.
I feel like it's not, but keep going.
It's basically my PI, David Page. He is leading this instrument, which is an infrared radiometer that is in orbit around the moon currently and has been for the last decade or so.
Wow.
So it has the second largest data set on the moon. Yeah.
I learned a lot about Elfin a few weeks ago. I don't know if you heard. But yeah, okay, so this is a lunar orbiter. and it's not the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter.
It is the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter.
Oh, oops.
Yeah.
Okay. LRO is very famous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Diviner is an instrument on the LRO.
On LRO.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and it's very complementary to LROC, which is the camera. So all the cool pictures of the moon that you see, they're likely from LROC.
Okay.
And that's led by Mark Robinson, who's now at Intuitive Machines.
What is Intuitive Machines?
Intuitive Machines is this private company that is now doing a bunch of moon launches, one of which just failed, actually. It fell on its side yet again.
You know, it seems like nobody can get back into space anymore these days. Yeah. I think we'll probably talk more about that later, because every time you and I hang out, we talk about how nobody knows how to go back to the moon.
Yeah.
That's like our thing. Like me and Emerson is like reasons we don't like public school. And then you and I is like, we can never go back to the moon. But anyway, so you've been a booth leader. That's Diviner. And then the moon, we know what the moon is. In infrared. What does it mean to see the moon in infrared?
Yeah, so it's a specific wavelength of the electromagnetic spectrum that allows us to detect temperatures on the surface of the moon. And it's very superficial, so it's only like the uppermost maybe centimeters of surface of the moon that we're able to detect.
Yeah, so what Jaahnavee is saying here is that you can really only understand the peel of the moon, like the very thin skin on the top of the moon. So we're not going to get any data on like what's at the center of the moon, but we're just going to look at the surface and try to learn some temperature data from.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do the kids at the booth get to like look at?
Yeah, so obviously this is kind of difficult to understand if you present it as a jargon-filled, explanation like this. So we have to kind of simplify it for the kids, which allows me to get back to the basics quite a bit. So we have a demonstration of QuickMap, which is the tool that was developed by Arizona State University in order to visualize all of the data sets that we have on LRO. And so it's really interactive. You can zoom into the surface. It's pretty high resolution.
Yeah.
You can layer different data sets, look at the temperatures of the moon. And so kids can play around with it, and they can look at hot craters or cold spots.
I mean, I've seen the pictures because I used to make the flyers and you submitted a bunch of photos and I was like, oh, this is actually like really cool high res stuff. But the pictures are mostly in like green and red because your eyes don't actually see infrared.
Yeah.
So we sort of map these temperatures to like colors we can see. So the moon, if you look at it, is like white, I think.
Yeah, it's like this light, and I think Emerson mentioned this actually, which I was so impressed that they remembered.
Yeah.
That the geology of it's called lunar anorthosite, which is this like light material on the highlands.
Yeah.
And then the mare, like they said, is basalt, which is this darker.
This
material.
did get mentioned,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Girl, you're crazy. I don't know how you remember all this stuff." So when kids look at these pictures of the moon in colors, like what do you tell them? Do you say like this section's hot, this section's cold?
Yeah, we sort of try to explain to them why it might be hot and cold because
I'm also curious.
So this is actually kind of what I studied for my first project for my thesis, which is looking at the thickness of that peel that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And we determined this thickness using the heat that rocks retain on the surface at night, just because rocks behave differently. And so because they retain...
Like the rocks versus the sand?
Versus the sand.
Got it. Okay.
And so because they retain heat, we can actually detect them on the surface of the moon just using infrared.
Yeah.
And using that, we can associate them with the craters, the impact craters that they came from, and see how deep these impact craters went.
Okay, so the rocks are going to come up as a different color in infrared from sand because they're hotter. And so you look at this thing and it's like cold, 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 and then one spot of hot. And you're like, this thing must be a rock. And then you can sort of imagine where the rock came from.
Yeah.
Using physics modeling or just guesswork.
Yeah, using physics modeling.
Okay.
I specifically used crater morphology, which is basically just how a crater forms, the physics and the kinetics with which it forms, depending on the impact size, and then the kind of layers that it forms once it does.
Yeah, because when you drop a rock in sand, it sort of has this like water drop effect of all these like sand from all around the rock are going to spread out. So it's not exactly just the dent. It's kind of a tunnel a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. Like a water droplet, exactly. And it has those, we call them rims, but it's basically a flip on the edges that looks like it goes up and then dips.
Yeah, I remember learning this when I took Solgi Moon's class with you. But anyway, booth leading. You have been leading this booth for 3 years. That's right? Are you going to lead it again this year?
I do, and we've been trying to add new elements actually each year, which honestly, it gives me so much excitement and so much happiness because so this last year we added a rock heating demo. So we had 3 different petri dishes of what we call, it's not actual regolith simulant, which lunar scientists will use to study the composition of the lunar regolith because actual lunar samples are.
That's like somebody has this tray of sand in their lab that they throw rocks at to exactly mimic what's happening on the moon. But kids at EYU don't need to mimic exactly what's happening on the moon. They can do something close.
Yeah, so we basically grind up cement.
Yeah.
And that's pretty similar, we found, thermally at least. It behaves quite a lot like actual lunar dust.
Yeah.
And so
that's
we
really
had,
funny.
yeah, it's really cool that we can use materials on Earth. I mean, which is the whole point of studying Earth as a planet in order to understand our solar system. But we basically use these 3 petri dishes to then heat them up with a heat lamp, and then we can actually have them touch each one so that they can see them cooling off at different rates, so that they can associate that with what's happening on the surface of the moon.
With like their own heat too. That's really cool. I always love pointing infrared cameras at people. It's sometimes rude because like if they have to pass gas, you'll see it.
Yeah.
But it is kind of funny. And then a lot of people's noses are really cold.
Really cold.
Yeah.
You can also tell if people have just washed their hands.
Oh, that's funny. But anyway, so the kids get to see the rock heating from their own heat, and then they get to look at the pictures of the moon? Or do you have like video footage?
We usually have one screen that shows the orbiter in real time, actually. That is basically they've generated using physics modeling an orbiter orbiting the moon on QuickMap, which is that tool I was talking about.
Okay.
And we also have another screen that they can take the mouse and themselves zoom in and out of the moon and like go to places that they want to. So it's interactively they can use.
Is that like a pre-recorded image, or because they're not driving the LRO?
No, they're not driving LRO.
Yeah.
So the tool is basically to look at the data sets.
Okay.
So they can just interactively look at the data sets.
Yeah, like planetariums.
Yeah, kind of. And it's like looking at. Have you ever used JMars?
No.
Oh, okay. That's another tool to just like, you can use it to visualize data sets, and it's really user friendly because it's just a bunch of buttons, so you don't actually have to code anything. And,
yeah. Since I'm in radio, nothing we deal with like looks like anything, so
Yeah.
there's no like fun visualizations like that.
That's true.
But that's cool. What are you hoping that the kids learn from your booth? Like if they could learn one thing, because there's now all these other elements too.
Mm-hmm. I'm hoping that they understand the value of the electromagnetic spectrum. I think the idea that we live in this universe where we can understand so much science just by looking at light is mind-blowing.
I agree.
And this is just, infrared is one wavelength of this spectrum.
Yeah.
So there's so much more. I work in the gamma spectrum, which is higher frequency light as well, and we can do so many very different things with that
we'll
spectrum.
definitely have to get into that later.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
One of my students that I was TAing asked me if there were gamma ray telescopes, and I had to look it up. So this is a good resource for everybody. But anyway, I also hope that the kids understand like how magical things are. Like there's so much more than what you can see.
Mm-hmm.
And even in elementary school, you're like, there's like see, hear, touch, smell, taste. Like you need to understand that all of these things can contribute to science.
Yep.
But now there's this like other hidden thing that's all this stuff is always going on and you can't see it. Have you had any moments where you feel like the kids are really understanding this, or like any specific kids where you're like, this kid's awesome?
Yeah, I've definitely had some really, really intelligent kids. And I know as soon as I see them, I'm like, this kid knows what they're talking about. But usually I have the realization when they ask really good questions, or if I ask them questions, usually like, so what do you think is going to happen if I remove this rock from the heat lamp and I let it cool? And then they give me the exact right answer. And they're like, oh, it's going to cool off less quickly. And that's why you see these hot spots. And they'll like connect all of the elements of our booth without even me prompting them to.
That's awesome.
And it's incredible.
I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, I really like spending time with children. And from this, I feel like you do too.
Yeah. I really do. I love kids.
That's cool. So you must love being a booth leader then.
I love being a booth leader. And I think it's honestly one of the best decisions I made, because communications was good to understand the structure of EYU and how it operates and how honestly time consuming it is. Like it's made me appreciate, it's made me appreciate more all of the board members and how seamlessly I feel like EYU happens every year. It just and I feel
Oh
like
my gosh.
maybe I tell you this, but I tell some of the board members, how grateful I am for their work that they put in, because it feels like there are never any hiccups. But then they'll tell me, really? Like, we've experienced so much.
Thank you. I'm gonna cry. I was the booth coordinator last year, and everything went so smoothly. Because I really put in some hours beforehand. Well, everything went smoothly except for the one booth that requested 0 t-shirts and 0 lunches, and then showed up and they were like, "Where are our lunches and t-shirts? We have 30 volunteers." And then I'm usually at the info booth with my partner.
Yeah.
And my partner looks like very commandeering, very serious.
Yeah.
So they walked past me and they go to him, even though I'm wearing the vest, and they ask him like, "Where are our lunches and t-shirts?" And he's like, "Oh, like, don't ask me, like, ask her, the girl in the pigtails next to me in the reflector vest." So like I march over to their booth with my laptop and I had to show them the business. But that was honestly the worst thing that happened last year, which is great.
It felt like there were no hiccups.
Yeah.
I love how smoothly it goes every year, and I really appreciate all of your work.
Thank you. Unfortunately, it sounds like you're such a good booth leader. I can't snipe you to come back to the board.
No, I love leading this booth. And I think maybe when
Yeah.
I graduate, I don't know who's going to take over,
I
because
know.
my PI actually might be paring back a little bit.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I will keep an eye out for your booth because this one sounds really amazing. Anyway,
Thank you.
do you have any final words about the EYU of it all?
I mean, if there, for some reason, is any, middle or elementary or high schooler listening, just come
Well,
through.
my brother's listening. He's a
Oh.
junior in high school.
Hi, Megan's brother. But please come through to EYU. I promise you won't regret it. I've told my cousins to come out, and my cousin is actually a high functioning autistic kid, and he loves physics like no other kid I know.
Yeah.
And I actually thought that EYU would be kind of beneath him, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
And he really, he's taking college level courses right now.
Dang.
And he thoroughly enjoyed EYU. I think it's the tactile nature of it. Being
Yeah.
able to touch things, being able to see things happen in real time is so beneficial. So just please come out. I promise it'll be worth it.
There's a lot to unpack there. First, it's not sensory overload for your cousin.
No.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because I was interviewing one of our speaker coordinators, and the speaker room is a great place. Like, if you need to cool off from sensory overload, that's where I go to. So it's great that your cousin, just enjoys the event so much that none of the chaos bothers them.
And I think it's because he gets to choose how much he wants to take in and how much he doesn't.
Yeah.
I think it's sometimes more stressful for us because we have to be immersed in it the whole day.
Yeah.
But he, can take breaks when he wants. If he doesn't want to stay the whole time, if he just wants to go up to the telescope and, just crash there for a while, he could do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The other thing is EYU is so special because professors volunteer at booths.
Yeah.
You can walk around and see UCLA's star-studded faculty at these booths. And so, no, science at EYU is never going to be beneath you because the people you're talking to are literally the experts in that field.
Yeah, they're celebrities.
Which is amazing because I always make this joke, but if you want to have a one-on-one meeting with your PI once a week, sometimes it's difficult. But if you go to EYU, you can hang out with our PIs for 8 hours. So we're talking a little bit about family. You have some local family?
I do, yeah. So they're kind of distant in the sense that they're my dad's cousins.
Okay.
But because I don't know, I've always been close to his side of the family, and they've always been so helpful, especially when I decided that I wanted to come to UCLA for undergrad. They were so warm and welcoming, and it's so nice to have them. They live in Redondo Beach, so it's also a beautiful
Awesome.
place to live.
South Bay? Shout out South Bay.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask if you were getting back with your family this weekend because you are celebrating a holiday.
I wish I was. And actually, this is one of the things that makes me miss home so much. For context, I grew up in India, in New Delhi, and I miss my family because my parents are there. But my mom is actually flying to the U.S. She is on her way right now to Chicago, and then she'll be in L.A. next week.
That is so exciting. I'm so happy for you. But could you explain Holi for us?
Yeah, so Holi is the festival of colors, and it's I would say the second biggest festival after Diwali in India. which we don't have to get into now, but Holi is basically a time for joy, prosperity. As with any of the big festivals in India, it's supposed to bring, good luck. It marks the beginning of the harvest festival, the spring season.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's a bunch of different things, and it means different things to different people. But it's rooted in, I guess, although it's rooted in Hinduism, a lot of different religions now celebrate it. It's sort of and anyone with any sort of Indian ties celebrates it.
Okay, so I'm allowed to celebrate now.
Yeah.
That I've heard you talk about it for 3 sentences.
Exactly.
But I always see people with like the colorful sand.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's colored powder basically. And there actually is some controversy over it because some of it can be harmful for your eyes.
Oh, oops. Okay.
Yeah, but I think most of the stuff that they sell in the US is pretty safe. And India is getting a lot better with their the ingredients that they put in the colors. But yeah, it's just basically you know, reds, greens, yellows, pinks, anything you could think of. And the traditional way to, when you first see someone on that day, you wish them happy Holi and you grab a handful of color and you smear it on either cheek.
Oh.
And it's just, it's the most wholesome festival.
That's really cute because like Mardi Gras just passed where when you see somebody you throw necklaces around them, and this is like, you give somebody pretty makeup. Well, happy Holi to everybody, and we're going to take a short break and listen to some music. Our first song is In Love by
Kid Cudi.
When we used to air on the radio, we would listen to some music now. But since you're streaming, for copyright reasons, we will not. But you're welcome to pause here and go listen to some songs. And you're back with DJ Stellar Cloud and
DJ Stats Sleuth.
So DJ Stats Sleuth picked the 2 songs that we heard today. The first one was...
This is called In Love by Kid Cudi.
And what inspired you to pick this one?
Well, this one I've been obsessed with for a while, and I think a lot of people who I've talked to about this will attest that I am obsessed with the short film that's on Netflix. It's this animated short film, and the animation style is
what's the name of the short film?
That's a good question. I actually don't. I think it's called Intergalactic, which is the name of the album.
It is on the little album cover.
Yeah.
Okay, so, what is it about?
It's basically a super simple story. It's this couple in New York that ends up breaking up because they just aren't feeling it. And then he, is kind of moving on with his life and trying to build his own career in New York, in the city. And he meets this girl basically through a house party that is really loud and annoying him.
It's a new girl number 2.
A new girl, yeah.
No, okay.
And he slowly falls in love with her, and it's basically just their story and how they find each other and build their lives around each other in the city with all the chaos.
Oh, it has nothing to do with space.
It has nothing to do with space.
Oh, girl. Okay,
yeah.
okay, but
it's
the animation
just a
style.
very trippy, very beautifully done, honestly, film. Because it's such a simple story, but I don't know, it makes me feel all these things because of the music.
Yeah, it's like Scott Pilgrim.
Oh,
Sorry, not to like dumb down your like very serious media here with Scott Pilgrim. But that's like the same thing that happens in the music in Scott Pilgrim so good that you're like, wow, this story is really compelling, but it's like not. Anyway, so the short film, you love Intergalactic, highly recommend. And is this song part of the short film?
This song is, yeah. So the whole album features in the short film in various ways. Some of them are instrumental, so they occur while other scenes are happening.
Yeah.
But these songs, which have lyrics to them, there's usually some sort of monologue or some sort of like, it's really... It's really great.
Kind of sounds like Spider-Verse.
It is. It's exactly like that. And I was going to say it's reminiscent of that animation style.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's cool that I clocked that. Is the whole album Kid Cudi? Like, is he the whole artist or?
He is. I think he might have some featuring artists, but he is the main artist on all the songs.
Cool. Yeah. I don't know anything about him. Do you?
This is the only album, honestly, that I've been super into.
Yeah.
But I do know that he tried to do a backflip at Coachella, I think 2 years ago or a year ago, and hurt himself.
Okay.
That's the only thing I know.
Filthy Frank, sorry, he goes by Joji now, did something similar at UCSD's music festival back when I was there. He was doing these one-handed handstands, and then after one of them, he's like, I'm not doing those anymore. And I'm like, I don't know why you were doing them in the first place. You make sad boy music. But anyway, your second song, Glass Animals.
Yeah. So them I actually saw live. Also a big fan of their music. And the reason that I played this song is because, well, both of them have a similar vibe. It really, neither of them has anything to do with space.
That's totally fine.
Which is funny, but it's this song was the very first song that I ever heard by Glass Animals.
What was it called?
It's called Life Itself.
Okay. Yeah. For reference, when this gets posted to Spotify, the music's not going to be in it. So we have to like say the titles and like,
oh,
that's why I'm making you do this.
Okay. No, you're good. So it's called Life Itself by Glass Animals. And the reason it's one of my favorite songs, well, it's special to me because it's the first song that I ever heard by them.
Oh, but I know you're a huge Glass Animals stan. So that's kind of surprising.
Yeah, that's the first song I ever heard. And it also has elements of Indian music in it, which it really intrigued me. And that's why I was so drawn to the song. And also the music video is great. But that was one of the things, anyone who knows me knows that I feel like I project my Indianness quite a bit. It's one of the most important things to me. And I think that this song really drew me in because of that Indian instrumentation at the beginning.
No, I think that's great. I've always loved that you also expect everybody to pronounce your name.
Yeah.
It's not complicated. Yeah.
The spelling is.
But like, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that you always promote Indian culture like all the time. I love learning about your culture and your background and all that. But we can get into that for a little bit. So you were born...
I was actually born in Illinois, in Rockford, which is about an hour and a half-ish out of Chicago.
Hey, Chicago. Our little guest right here is a Chicagoan. There's another person sitting in the booth with us who goes to UC Chicago.
University of Chicago.
Dang, that was really hard. Okay, so you were born in Rockford, Illinois. Was your family living there at the time?
Yeah, my parents were there. My dad, I think I don't know if he had started his MBA, but he was a software engineer.
Oh, okay.
And I think the first year that I was alive, he was in his MBA program. My mom was actively teaching Bharatanatyam, which is an Indian classical dance form.
Yes. Okay. I did say that you were a dancer in the little caption. Did you learn dancing from your mom?
I did. Yeah. For a very long time, actually.
Really? Mm-hmm. And then how long were you all in Illinois? Because they're not there anymore.
No, they're not there. They're in Delhi now. But I was there until I was 6.5-ish.
Okay.
And my brother was also born there, and he was there until he was 1.5, I would say.
Okay.
And then we moved to Delhi, and we've been there ever since.
So I'm assuming your parents immigrated to Illinois from India. Mm-hmm. And then so what inspired them to like go back? Like, was that always the plan? Like, we're going to finish schooling and go back, or?
No, it wasn't actually always the plan. Okay. At least they might correct me after this if they're listening. But I don't think it was always the plan. I think it was something that they decided to do because their parents were there, my grandparents.
Oh,
and so they wanted to be closer to them.
Yeah.
And, you know, my mom's career really, even though she was doing such an incredible job in the United States, in Rockford, Illinois, like Bumble, I'm not going to cuss on on this channel, but nowhere she was doing such an incredible job. But honestly, her career is now thriving in India.
So she's an Indian dance teacher in India now.
In India, yeah.
Wow.
She has her own dance school.
That's awesome. But you just brought up a really good point. Are there other Indian people in Rockford?
There are.
Okay.
And we knew all of them.
Yes.
There were maybe 3 families, I think, who were Indian, and we knew every single one.
What made your parents choose a place that like...
It was my dad's job. So the company that he was working for was headquartered in Rockford. And so that's just where he ended up.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad that we moved to India. Honestly, it's such a blessing to have lived in 2 different countries. Mm-hmm. And also to live with people who look like me and speak the same language. I guess the language that I had to learn.
Oh, wait. So is English your first language?
English is my first language.
Okay. Yeah. And then what did you learn when you moved to Delhi?
I learned Hindi.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would you consider yourself like fully bilingual now?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. That is really nice. I never learned a second language, but my mom moved to the States when she was also around 6.5. And her English is perfect. It's way better than mine, which is really funny. Shout out to Mom. I have to shout out my mom on every episode just because I can't stop talking about her.
Of course. She's great.
So your mom ran an Indian dance studio in Illinois and then took off. Now she's Indian dance studio in India. What is your dad up to now? He
has always been a software engineer. Mm-hmm. But I think I hope at some point he would like to, since both me and my younger brother are out of college.
Yeah.
I hope he retires soon and does his own thing. I think he has a lot of really cool ideas that would do really well, honestly. But he doesn't even need them to be profitable. It could just be for fun.
Yeah.
And I think he genuinely enjoys what he does. But I think he needs to retire and start his own thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I just the reason I'm asking is because your parents really sound like they are the epitome of the American dream. It's
Yeah.
like, we're going to come from a different country. We're going to set foot in unknown territory, Rockford, Illinois, where we're the only Indian people. We're not afraid of being Indian. We're going to do Indian dance here.
Yeah.
We're going to know all the other Indian people here and be proud of our culture. And then, things happen to change. You move around, but that's awesome.
Yeah. It really makes you think about how easy we have it. I just feel like I mean, not to say that we don't have our own struggles, but I think it puts in a lot of my life into perspective, thinking that, if they did that back in their day when brown people were few and far between, especially in Rockford, Illinois.
Yeah.
I think, when you have, LA is still relatively less Indian than a lot of other cities in the United States, but
I didn't know that.
it's still, that's why the Indian food here is not great, actually.
Girl, I'm so scared of tree nuts.
That's fair.
I have a very severe tree nut allergy, and so a lot of Indian food uses cashew
Yeah.
milk, and people sometimes forget that they use cashew milk instead of yogurt, and then it's low-key over for me.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did not know that the Indian food in LA is not very good, but I did know that the Indian food in Berkeley is very good.
It is very good.
Okay.
Yeah. It's much better than in LA. You can go to Cerritos and Irvine. They have good Indian food, but LA itself is not where it's at.
Interesting. So I'm guessing that was not a factor when you decided to move to LA.
No, it was the best school I got into, so I just decided to move here.
Okay, so you went to high school in Delhi.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then you applied to college, and you were applying to college. Did you only apply in the States, or
I did only apply in the States.
what
yeah.
inspired you to do all of that?
Honestly, I don't think it was in the cards from my family necessarily to send us to the States. It just sort of was something that happened. I think my parents decided that they would be willing to send me to the States, and we kept our citizenship because India doesn't allow dual citizenship.
So you never became an Indian citizen?
I never became an Indian citizen. So
Interesting.
We, all four of us, in fact, my parents are still U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
Which, makes it the one country that is easy for us to study in outside of India because they can come visit us whenever they want.
But they're also allowed to go back into India.
They're also allowed to go back into India. And we have a special visa. It's called an OCI, which is an overseas citizen of India.
Interesting.
And it's a lifetime visa, basically.
Okay.
You have.
I mean, that's great for them, but this is news to me that nobody can be a dual citizen of India.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really sad because I want to vote in India and I want to be a dual citizen, but I would have to give up my U.S. citizenship for that, and it's not worth it.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Also, because you've just spent so much of your life there. You were there from 6 to 17.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's half of your life.
Yeah. Well, kind of.
I mean, half of your conscious life, because 0 to 4, it's not like you know what's going on in the world.
True.
But anyway, so you made the big leap to come back to the States, to UCLA, where you studied statistics.
I did. I studied statistics and minored in geophysics and space physics.
Oh, I did not know that part. So you minored in the department that you're in now.
I did, yeah. And that's how I met Dave, actually, my PI.
Really? So you met Dave all those years ago. But anyway, I want to know why you picked statistics.
Honestly, I fell into it. And I think most people who do major in statistics fall into it, kind of like our department. I don't think anyone ever goes into college. I mean, if you do, props to you. You must be great at statistics. I was not. I had to find it, and it's because...
did you come in undeclared?
I came in undeclared.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I thought that I wanted to do economics, but I was never very good at economics, even in high school.
But your dad with the MBA, your mom's a self-business owner.
Yeah, and my mom actually majored in economics in undergrad.
Oh, okay. I mean, that makes sense that she was able to launch her own dance studio and stay afloat.
Yeah, and I think I just decided that it was lucrative and something that I wanted to do, and eventually maybe I'd want to get a job. I interned at the Federal Reserve, actually, in Chicago.
Really?
Yeah, in the I think it was the law enforcement unit or something.
This is in college?
This was in college.
Okay.
It was really random, but
this is before you picked statistics.
This was after I had picked statistics.
Okay.
Yeah. But I was toying with the idea still of doing economics.
Also, like, it's not that weird to, like, be an econ and be a stats major.
Right.
But we'll have to figure out how you went from stats econ to whatever it is you do now.
So I just I initially started undeclared. Then I decided, okay, maybe I want to try psychology. Was not for me.
Okay.
Then I decided, okay, I actually miss math. So my dad was the one who suggested, why don't you try stats?
Okay.
And so I tried it, and I actually did really like it initially. It got more challenging.
My dad also picked my major. It's funny. We have a lot in common.
We do have a lot
which
in
I'm
common.
learning now.
And so I picked statistics, and then basically I was just too deep in to stop, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to learn to love this and then make the best out of it.
Yeah.
My third year is when I went to the physics department at UCLA.
Okay.
Which I have a lot of poor things to say about that department, unfortunately.
That's very fair of you because I also did not apply there, but we're going to not say them on the air. You can tell me later.
Yeah.
But sorry, for people at home, if you're a stats major, like, what do you do? Like, what do you learn?
So it's mostly just understanding how to mold data, how to use data, but how to do it in a mathematical way. So a lot of it is actually quite theoretical. So it's learning what a matrix is, like basically heavily, the foundation is in linear algebra.
Mm-hmm.
So it's learning how to manipulate matrices, learning how to multiply matrices, how to divide them, and basically using them as large data sets that you will then implement in your coding software to manipulate larger data sets. And but very theoretical and not something I super enjoyed.
It was kind of like the theory behind what data scientists do now.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's interesting actually that you bring that up. No, you're good. But a lot of computer scientists now are data scientists, and not a lot of statisticians get into data science.
Yes.
Which to me is very interesting because I think statisticians have the fundamental theory that's needed to understanding a lot of the algorithms that are used to build these AI tools that we use today. But I'm not going to say CS majors don't have that foundational knowledge, but I don't think it's part of their curriculum for sure. So they'd have to learn it on their own.
Yes.
So it's just really interesting to me that stats majors end up going into economics or business. Or,
Well, I'm an empirical machine learning scientist these days. And so I do use the total like front end of all the things that you learned, like the matrix multiplication, gradient descent, and all that. But I'm not very good at it. And I wonder if it's because I don't know what gradient descent is.
That actually is the reason I think people in every field should take a stats class.
Yeah.
Irrespective of what you're doing, like it's useful. My roommate is a neuroscience major, and she uses stats all the time.
Shout out to your roommate. You only have great things to say about your roommate, and I love
incredible.
that. And she's randomly drawn.
She was random.
Yeah.
And so grateful.
Yeah.
She is really cool, and we get along really well, which is so. It's just such a. I'm so lucky.
No, that is a blessing.
Yeah.
But
I've
anyway,
had some bad roommates.
Everybody should take a statistics class. I completely agree with that. I've only taken statistical mechanics. Very embarrassing.
Oh God.
I know, very embarrassing. So you went from stats, you tried physics, you weren't a huge fan of physics.
I actually never got the opportunity to try it because the counselor took one look at me in the physics department and said, "Sweetie, you won't make it in this department."
I'm sorry. We actually do have to talk trash about the physics department now because this is a very relevant story. Okay. The student advising officer, the SAO, are they still here today?
I actually don't know.
Okay. Since we don't know, we may not be talking trash about UCLA employee, but I can't believe that this happened to you.
Yeah. So that really sort of put me off.
What the heck? But so many physicists are Indian.
Yeah.
So like, why was that even a thing?
It's because actually, maybe it's a good thing that she didn't profile me because she looked at my my record, and I had taken psych classes, and then I had taken like some economics and some stats.
Yeah.
And so I think she was like, "You have no STEM background."
Because, but like Indian high school's no joke.
Yeah, it's no joke.
Yeah.
I had taken physics 1A, 1B, 1C in class 11 and 12.
Yeah.
Already. So, but they don't necessarily understand that because they don't see it on paper. So it's hard for them to, which I'm not defending what she said. I don't think
but
you
like,
should have
said
said
that. But can we get 2 seconds to explain myself?
Yeah.
Yeah, before you're like, no,
this is not for you.
Yeah.
And so I just decided I didn't want to do it. But then I saw actually I think it's EPSS 9, which is the solar system and planets
I have
class.
no idea. Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take this for fun because I really miss space science and I want to do this.
Yeah.
And Vasilis was teaching it that year.
Okay, shout out to Vasilis Angelopoulos.
And I thought he was a great teacher actually for that GE course.
Okay, I've never met him.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm only like friends with his grad students, but
that's fair.
Yeah.
I don't think I've interacted with him actually since then. And this was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I took this class and I immediately fell in love. I think it also helped that I got an A+ in the class because I was...
That always helps.
Yeah. I loved it so much. And I was like, you know what? I need to know what department this professor is from. And that's how I got introduced to EPSS.
Yeah. So EPSS, or the Earth, Planetary, and Space Sciences Department, is the home department of me, Jaahnavee, Emmanuel, Abijah, Emerson. But it's not very well advertised.
No.
Our building is called Geology, and I didn't know about it when I was applying to undergrad. So I
Neither
never
did I.
blame anybody for like not choosing this, but this is what I would have chosen as a major if I knew it existed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I honestly would have probably, I think, double majored or either with the minor in geophysics, I would have majored in geology. Like I feel like
see.
I love geology so much and I love field work and I'm a big, I love camping, I love hiking, I love
field work is you go out to the earth rocks and touch the earth rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned the tactile element in EYU, as a fully formed almost 29-year-old adult.
You're almost 29. You look so
Almost
young.
29. Oh, thank you.
Not that like 29 is old, but like
it feels old. I feel my back giving out, which is not good.
girl, okay.
We won't.
And that's
talk
on
about
yoga,
this.
but yeah.
But yeah, I think as like I said, as a fully grown adult, I appreciate the tactile nature of field science, and I think it helps so much with my understanding of geology. And I do truly wish that I had taken some geology classes in undergrad, and I think if I had known about the department earlier on than my third year, I would have done that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I went to UC San Diego, and we don't really have an equivalent.
Beautiful school.
Beautiful school, but we don't have an EPSS equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never really fully got into that. But, I mean, that must have been so cool, taking EPSS 9 when the rest of your classes are statistics.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
And I was one of the few people, actually, that was interested in geospatial statistics. And I was trying to...
we have to... Geospatial statistics. What is this?
This is... And I actually kind of worked in it a little bit when I was working in between undergrad and grad school.
Mm-hmm.
But it's this facet of statistics that deals with geospatial positioning.
Is this satellites?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's kind of GPS essentially.
Yeah.
But it's the statistics behind GPS.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like, is it the mechanics of where the satellite's going to go, or is it like how we detect like the GPS is looking down at you and it has some error bars on where you are?
It's kind of about understanding like the linear algebra behind reference frames and like understanding, so it's projections and understanding how we analyze data on the sphere that is Earth.
Okay.
Basically.
So GPS takes a picture of Earth. Earth is round, but the GPS picture is a flat square. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, I guess it's technically not a picture. It's a positioning, like it's a triangulation.
Yeah.
So it's all data that we then coalesce into a picture.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were sort of working on like how we're going to take the data from the GPS and make it into something usable for people. That sounds very complicated.
It was really cool.
I do understand how that is a lot of linear algebra. When did you start working on that?
I graduated in 2018, and
with your stats,
with my stats in
geophysics minor.
Yeah, and no one wanted me. I really wanted a job at JPL,
but you had a job at JPL.
Well, as a graduate student, yeah.
Okay.
But they saw my resume and they said, "You don't have a physics background." I said, "Well, I'm
Why does
in geophysics.
this keep happening to you?
It keeps happening to me."
Oh my gosh!
And so I was like, "Okay, well, there's no way I'm going to get a job at JPL." And I ran into a recruiter at one of the job fairs from Booz Allen Hamilton.
Oh yeah, love them.
Which is this consulting company that mostly does business consulting on the East Coast, but they work with aerospace and defense on the West Coast.
Yeah.
And so she was like, your intersection of statistics and geophysics is perfect. So I actually did a summer internship.
Why did you
with
sound
them.
like a LinkedIn auto message?
I worked really hard on my elevator pitch. Yeah. Oh my God. As an undergrad, I really worked hard to make sure that I was presenting this perfect image, to recruiters. But yeah,
which is hard when you're 20.
Yeah. It's not the best. And I mean, I was so grateful that they recognized that I had this intersection of the two. And I was interested in doing something related to space and global positioning. And so when I, approached her, she was like, "Oh, you look like your resume looks good. We should bring you in for an internship."
Yeah,
and
that's
so I
awesome.
did a summer internship with Booz Allen Hamilton,
Okay.
and I was working on we were working on a VR or virtual actually augmented reality heads-up display.
Okay.
And I was working on something called a Kalman filter for the GPS positioning of that heads-up display.
Okay.
And it was the coolest thing I had ever done.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is kind of where I want to work.
Yeah.
And so I worked for them after I graduated for 3 years on basically GPS chips and visualizing the data coming from GPS testing. And it was great. I learned a lot because shout out Homan, who is definitely not listening because he doesn't know this exists. But
you can send him the link.
That's true. I should have probably done that. But he was an incredible boss, and I'm still in touch with him today.
That's awesome.
And he really prioritized my learning statistical tools and visualization tools. But anyway, that's sort of how I ended up there.
Okay, and then from there, you did go work at JPL.
No.
No?
Mm-mm.
I just see that picture of you in front of the JPL poster.
The JPL
your little
poster.
Zoom profile picture.
Oh, that's when I was decided. Okay, so actually that was in my third year. I was part of a neuroscience lab.
Oh, okay.
And I was doing data analysis for them.
Okay.
So they wanted a statistics major because they use Stata, which is the statistics tool that not a lot of people use outside of academia, honestly.
Okay.
But
academia is if you're an undergrad, graduate student, professor, postdoc, something at a school or a research institution. But anyway, keep going.
Yeah, and so the graduate student that I was working with was doing, he was studying behavioral trends in children with like cardio issues. So
interesting.
Heart rate variability stuff, which is basically if any of you have an Apple Watch or a smartwatch and it tracks your HRV, it's just a fancy way of saying how quickly your heart recovers.
Yeah.
So I was in charge of the data analysis for that. And it was super random because I never wanted to get into neuroscience or kids psychology really.
Yeah.
And at that point I had pretty much decided I wanted to get into space science or GPS. It was just a way for me to earn money.
But as an undergrad, you take the jobs you can get, especially any amount of job experience as an undergrad is so immensely valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for context, that's where the picture is from. I was presenting my poster of research I did in that lab for one of the neuroscience symposiums.
Dang.
Yeah.
You've done so much stuff. We should have a second episode where we actually talk about what you currently do because we didn't even get into that at all.
I'd love to.
Yeah. We'll have Abijah back on to talk about her research. We'll do another one with your research.
Sure.
And then other things to look forward to is that Emerson's going to interview me about my research because nobody's ever interviewed me before.
You, yeah.
Yeah. So
and the
that'll
stuff
be
you
fun.
do is so cool.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
But anyway, since we're coming up on the hour, the last question that I love to ask everybody, and this actually weirdly wraps up everything we've talked about, is if you were one of the kids at EYU, little 6-year-old Jaahnavee from Rockford, Illinois, what would you have wanted to hear from the people working there? A booth leader, a me person?
Ooh, honestly, I think maybe this has to do with the fact that I grew up in a culture that was kind of cutthroat in terms of academics.
Yeah.
But I would have wanted to hear, oh, you want to go to UCLA? You can go to UCLA. Here's a good way to get introduced to people who go here and they can tell you how to go here.
Oh my God. I don't know if I'm really emotional for other reasons, but I feel like I'm going to cry. Just to say that hey, you can do this.
Yeah.
would have been so meaningful to like so many of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to say that they could one day be in that position of, being a STEM major, or maybe even not being a STEM major and participating in EYU.
Yeah, we need non-STEM majors in EYU. I desperately need a graphic designer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so if there's any undergrads who are like into graphic design and want to help us out, we could really use your help. It's a multifaceted effort, intersectional approach. But anyway, that was very well said. Do you have any ways that people can keep up with you or keep up with your research that you want to share?
I have a website. It is...
You do? Oops.
Yeah.
I don't know it.
It is on my email signature, but, I should remember what it is. I think it's j.venkatraman@github.io or .github.io.
Okay.
But if you
Google you.
search my name, it should come up. But that's really the only thing I have. Other than that, you can look at the Diviner website.
What's the Diviner website? Okay, you are J Venkatraman at github.io.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the Diviner website is diviner.ucla.edu, I think.
Nice. Okay.
And that has, information about our entire team, research that we're putting out, news articles. The team does a lot. It's one of the best teams, I would say, the most successful instruments in the United States. So it's or in the world, really. And it's cool to...
We will definitely have to hear about it in a few weeks. But anyway, I think if you're listening to this episode, this is just proof that Jaahnavee came from a strange place. You were in the middle of nowhere where there was no Indian people, but your family said, you know what, we're going to be proud of being Indian.
Yeah.
And then eventually you come to college and several people look you in the face and tell you, you can't do this. And then you went and did it.
That's true. I haven't thought about it that way, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's very incredible, and you should be very proud of yourself.
Thank you.
I'm very impressed by everything we learned about you today.
Thank you.
But we are out of time, so this is DJ Stellar Cloud and
DJ Stats Sleuth
signing off. Never stop exploring.